Hi, everyone. We're very fortunate in the TC Tribe membership, which is a membership for seafarers to accelerate their personal and professional growth. And Wayne has kindly offered to come in as a mentor. And once you learn a little bit more about Wayne and what he does, I'm sure you'd all be keen to join the session. So Wayne, before we begin, if you can give us a little bit of background of who you are and what you do.
Okay, first of all, thanks very much for inviting me on. I think it's a privilege. My background is I'm obviously from the UK. I'm from a little town city called Liverpool, hence the accent, I suppose. Been there all my life, really. I have visited quite a lot of environments around the world, which are quite hostile. I joined the Royal Marine Reserves in 1989, and I suppose that's where my journey of being exposed to different styles of leadership began, really. I then, through the reserves, and in around about 96, started my own company. That grew quite well over 12 years. I was then managing and leading up to 100 people within an industry that I never ever thought I'd be in. And then in 2008, I decided to go into the Royal Marines full time, where I'm still at. And over that time, doing the usual career management promotion to the point now where I am at WO2, which is, I suppose, in some ways classed as from a maritime side, the sea daddy, and the individual to go to for that sound mind and a little bit of experience, and to help guide those young leaders and those senior leaders on the decisions they're potentially going to make. So in many ways, a disruptive thinker. And we were just saying there in the green room, I was due to come outside the Marines and go into behavioural change within industry. The Royal Navy at the time said they needed to change their behaviour, i.e. their culture. And I know the word culture gets battered around quite a lot. It gets attached to a lot of things. And I said, okay, I'll come for a couple of years. And I've been there 9. And through the 9 years, we identified that our leadership required a conscious mind around the causal, contributing, and aggravating factors around human factors. I am now and I've been for a number of years now, the head of human factors for the Royal Navy. They've also been tempted by the buzzwords around industry, around human performance, which is fine. That's peer-to-peer, individual and human performance. And now they're mature enough to where I'm installing a human factors system thinking within the organization. So we're chunking it right out really across the organization. That's going really well. It's at a maturity level, and it will grow as those leaders touch and feel the subjects around human factors. So one is of leadership and followship, subjects of that. That's about me.
Thanks, Wayne. So I'm very passionate about leadership, and I would love to really pick your brains. So I'm going to start off with my first question, because in the super yacht industry, unfortunately, we are rather behind with many things. And one of those is leadership. But the fact that the Royal Marines approached you and said, look, we need help. Obviously, there was an issue, some problems, perhaps a crisis. And what I find in our industry is that they are aware of the problems, but they ignore the problems and they don't ask for help. So at what point did they ask for help? What was going on?
So the average fatality rate within the Royal Navy at the time, they were averaging 3 fatal injuries a year through just people going to work. And people who are in the military understand that they sign on the dotted line and when away on operations, that they have to put themselves in danger, and those leaders have to lead those individuals into danger, and hopefully their plan has been successful to reduce the likelihood of people being hurt or unfortunately dying. But nobody gets up of a morning to go to work or go to the office, and if your office is an engine room on a ship or the bridge of a ship or working in the galley cooking the food for those people who are on board, to die. And the organization should provide enough health and safety and enough management to reduce the likelihood of. The leader at the time decided that we needed to change the thinking and behavior of everybody within the organization. And that was probably the first driver. And then sitting and looking at the culture, yes, we had different styles of leadership. Yes, we have umpteen different leadership training schedules, courses, that wherever label you wish to put on. Whereas how do you from that leadership, keep those subjects that have been endorsed on you conscious and alive all the time. And then we have those individuals that have those standards and those qualities on their conscious mind all day and every day. But we also have a proportion of people that are driven by either by promotion or by completing the task, which then sometimes erodes the good thinking that was implanted at the beginning. Plus also they have that learned behavior of seeing the individual that's above them, how they behave. And if they get promoted, they'll have an unconscious bias and practically drift into bad behaviors. So that constant challenge and having conversations around the whole areas of leadership and the subjects that come from that live all the time has helped the organization massively. Back in 2014, 2015, we started on this journey. We were looking at it. We were averaging 3. Now the organization is averaging 0 fatalities.
Wow.
Which is absolutely fantastic. But there's still a lot more work to do, because then as you achieve that, how do you then maintain that? Because as soon as you think you've arrived, if you think you've arrived, then you start to go backwards. So it's you never get off that carnal feel of it going round and look at it, refreshing it. And by looking at the systems that you employ, whether they support those leaders or those followers, then those systems need to be robust enough to recognize that they are going to make mistakes. And therefore, you should be able to generate an environment for that leader, that follower, put the hand up and say, I've made a mistake today. If I carried on making that mistake, then the situation have only got worse, without fear of being blamed or bullied or reprimanded for actually putting their hands up and recognize they've made an error. But then there are situations where those leaders and those managers will have to make a decision to break the rules. Breaking those rules, they recognize the situation they're in, and it might be exceptional to break those rules. Is it ever okay to break a rule? It's a debate in itself. While then having the seniors looking at having a conscious mind to understand what drove those people to make those decisions in that environment, in that situation at the time, then if they recognize that if they hadn't broke the rules, the situation would probably got worse, and therefore people have probably got hurt, or the organization would have probably got hurt financially or reputation. And then say, okay, that's fine, but we need to prevent it from being a routine violation where we always break the rules around here, but no one cares. So what does it matter? And having that conscious mind within that can then reset the system to say, and the system can learn once it's written and in place. It should be a learning system in order to keep up with one social environment background in which the way people are brought up, because a lot of our schooling now has changed dramatically from when I was at school. When I went to school, it was rows of chairs and tables. And if you were sat at the back, you were told not to speak up yourself within that hierarchical status classroom. Now, when you go into classrooms, they're round tables and the teachers are challenging those children to think and question and ask why. And as an organization, we should be able to understand that social environments on the way our children are brought up and educated is that they are going to come into the workplace and they are going to challenge and rightly challenge those questions and those tasks that are being asked of. And don't diss it, embrace it. And therefore, by having that holistic conversation around the tasks that we've got to do, will hopefully disrupt their thinking, improve situational awareness. That drives hopefully, probably a better decision-making process out of the individual or individuals that have to say go or no go on the project. Does that help us?
That makes sense. What I'm taking away from that is the importance of self-leadership and that it's an ongoing journey. A lot of super yacht crew progress up the rank without doing any leadership training, especially in the interior department. It's not mandatory. And I think that can be very dangerous. And what I'm also hearing from you is the importance of psychological safety and to see your team asking for help and feeling comfortable to make, we don't ideally want them to make mistakes, but they happen. We're human, but not feeling that their job will be at risk because if they've made a mistake. It's a learning opportunity.
Yeah.
I'd love to know from your perspective, another common thing we see within our industry is an abuse of power that comes up with the hierarchical structure. How would you address that?
So we have had occasions where people have been in those positions, but sometimes how do you supply them with a safe environment where they can raise those issues? We've just gone through a spate, not just in our industry, in quite a few industries, of unacceptable behavior with leaders. And therefore then there's got to be a just culture approach within the organization to see that. And if it is identified that those individuals have been negligent and that their behavior has been totally unacceptable, so it's the right outside, then those individuals should be taken to task and they're disciplined. The environment to which a lot of the areas that we created an environment where within that hierarchical status of that rank, we allowed that individual an area in confidentiality that they can speak in. And the way part one of the systems that we introduced within the human factors system approach is by supplying a group of facilitators that will hold if mentoring sessions, human factors facilitated sessions, call it what you will, but it allows an area where those people can air and talk about their concerns, but offer then solutions to those areas. So if people feel like they're being bullied or victimized within their workplace, they can talk and air and talk about that within that we call it a chat house. So it's all confidential and the facilitator never breaks the confidentiality in the room. That crew then speaks with that facilitator. And on a super yacht, I presume it's only a small crew. We have small vessels as well, but that's allowed to happen. Facilitator level will then sit with the senior management and the senior leadership on board, and they will ask, what are the concerns of their crew? Facilitator will then say the concerns that they've been hearing are more leadership, stress, fatigue, or how is that caused? It's caused by overbearing questions, tasks. How do they then manage those tasks? And by then having that debate, even if that leader asks who said that comment, and the facilitator says, unfortunately, I can't break that confidentiality. Is it the individual or is it the task that's causing that pressure? And one of the causal contributing aggravating factors that's causing that. So they will then debate it without realizing it, that the individual is being able to raise their issues without that personality effect coming in within that leader. And then a debate's had, and sometimes some decisions, they just have to be done and made because of the unfortunate situation they find themselves in. But the majority of the time, that debate is done. And therefore those solutions are taken on board and then adapted in place. We're now reducing the likelihood of those environments festering and growing. But as you said, we are human and humans are driven in many different ways. So will we'll ever get rid of it? I don't think you'll ever get rid of it, but you can reduce the likelihood of it happening. So we supply that safe environment for those people to wear and talk.
Brilliant. And I know that one of your go-to leadership styles is empathetic leadership.
Yeah.
As a last question, how would you describe it? What does it look like in action?
So I've just recently been on the receiving end of an empathetic leader who I've known him through his career. And he came in and sat down and you can see within his leadership style first of all, he did was listen to his people. And in listening to his people, he was practicing his social skills and building that rapport with the individuals. And within that, he was actually bearing his soul in many areas. But rather than wearing that cloak of invisibility, he opened his soul and he talked about his weaknesses as well as his strengths. And that was then demonstrating his self-awareness. But he was also then getting to understand those individuals, their self-awareness and their weaknesses. So there's a academic called Tuckman who produced about when you form teams, form the team, you have the storm and then the Norman and then the poor foreman. And I guess it's probably the same in your industry where that forming of the team, that storming areas, doing all that empathetic leadership styles, building the morale, being empathetic to what's happening in their family as well as what's happening in the workplace, and then forming the norm and then hopefully performing. And the question I always put to our leaders in the organization that I'm working with at the moment is, do you ever perform? Because I presume within the super yacht community, that crew will rotate out, rotate in, might be on a yacht for a couple of years or 18 months. It's very much the same in our organizations. How do you measure that performance? Are you performing, or do you think you're performing and you're only in that normal phase? And he very much is now set in place, because again, we've looked at that rotation and gone, that correct individual, is it good to have that individual for 2 years or 5 years? He's been embedded for 5 years. So it allows him that time to see those strategies come to flourish. His personal skills, being an empathetic leader, has changed the environment within his departments overnight. Just by spending that time with people and giving them that time and allowing them to air and talk about where they're at in work and where they're at home, and then applying empathy, self-awareness, his social skills, and self-regulating as well also within that. He demonstrated that within minutes of him sitting down with people and chatting. Now that morale is there, how does he maintain that? And by having that regular communication with his people. So we debated it afterwards and said, you're quite an empathetic lead anyway. I explained the parts of that. And he then sat mentally processed, and he could then identify where it was. And I said, now you're conscious of them. You need to embed them and revisit them. Not so much for his sake, but for his department's sake. For those follow to keep that link, that connection going with him. So from that, he's already gone, yeah, I thought about that. So he's now planned in his diary, in his calendar, and he's a very busy individual, as we all are in life. A regular touch base with those individuals and with those groups, because he understands his individual think and then group think, where they can have those debates. And he said, you do human factors. Can you do the confidential bit around the subjects? I don't wish so. He said, what? No, anything. So he said, just on that self-reg check. So, say again, sorry?
I said, that's brilliant. That's fantastic.
Apologies. Just to add to that, the senior leader of our organization at the moment in time, the individuals are right at the top of the tree. He demonstrates the same qualities. And in him demonstrating those qualities, has that ripple effect all the way through his leadership or chain of command or his managerial level. So it really does start at the top of the tree.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it permeates 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other area which our organization is really starting now to look at in leadership is the gender gap that we've always had. And that gender gap is being looked at, molded and shaped to ensure that all of the genders are inclusive and included. And a different way of thinking brings a different way of situational awareness, different decision-making process. And we're seeing the benefits of that as well, all the way through the whole thing. So that's really
amazing. What is your favorite workshop to run?
Oh, crikey. My favorite work. So I mentioned in the green room yesterday to yourself that yesterday I had a meeting with someone very senior in another military organization, quite a distance away from myself. And the greatest workshop is talking through, and it's not a one-way conversation, talking through the different styles of leadership and the things that can cause, aggravate, or contribute to the way things are done. But then seeing an individual who's very at the top of their game operationally at sea with and under their command, they had just personnel wise about 2,500 people, a lot of moving parts and a lot of strange areas within the world. It's when you actually see the penny drop of around the subjects that we're talking about, for them to then say, can you just give me a minute? Can we just go back to that model? And models are models. Academics have models all the time. Don't hang your hat on one model. Look at all, see how all of them apply. And then so about 2 or 3 hours after we completed what we were doing, and I saw the penny drop. Now that penny drop might happen right at the very beginning. It might happen in the last 5 minutes. Who knows? And then about 3 hours later, communication came back. Found it very interesting. I can see the benefits to me, to my little leaders, and to my organization, and to my people. Can we talk fair? And that's probably the best group there is. And also being stood in a queue in a shop or stood in a galley waiting to get the food on board a ship and listening to people's conversations in that queue waiting to get their food around subjects and around the behavioral change that we're trying to install in a positive way, where you get that little smile and go, the plan works.
Yeah. It's very rewarding work, especially when you see the changes occur and how it impacts individuals and team for long-term transformation.
Yeah.
Rather quick fix. I think you really need to go deep and unearth all those topics that we don't atypically discuss, like conflict, like values, etc.
Is how do you, because we attach emotion to everything in life, don't we? I'm attaching emotion to this interview that you and I, and this conversation you and I are having, even though you're on the other side of the world and I'm on this side. Probably your weather's better than mine, so I'm attaching emotion to that as well. How do you then break down that emotion and recognize that it's going to be in the room? Well, you only break it down by challenging it and talking about it while you're actually talking to those individuals about the tasks and the pressure that we're going to be having. And what emotion are we attaching? Are we attaching a good emotion or a bad emotion or don't really care emotion? And then by challenging that emotion, can you then park it and then move on to the next part of the conversation of where you're going to be? When we're talking with leaders, we recognize that emotion. And we always have a great debate around a word called criticism. And a lot of people go, can't use the word criticism. Well, why? Can we not use feedback? You attach an emotion now to a word, because a lot of the time, criticism, the emotion we attach to it is going to be negative.
Yes.
Yeah. You give me feedback. It's going to be positive. I'm going to learn and I'll be able to get on. Is that the giver or is that the receiver? Because if I sit down with one of my seniors, it's going to give me a report on how I'm going. He says, I'm going to give you some feedback. Unconsciously, I go, is that going to be criticism? Am I going to be expecting a bit of bad news here? How do I manage that? So we have a mnemonic called Sarah, which most people, when you sit down and talk about their performance, they're normally quite shocked. They're quite angry. And then you need to give them time to reflect exactly what's being said. And then we have a line underneath it, which is a timeline where when they reflect, they either cross the line and then accept what's being said. And then both parties can ask for help on how we can go forward. So we open that up. But therefore then a lot of people go, okay, so that's what I'll expect if I'm going to be giving feedback or criticism to an individual or a group. How can you then prime that emotional intelligence to those individuals or that individual before you start into the feedback, criticism, check or debrief? There's another word for debrief. Let's have a debrief. Okay, is that feedback or is that criticism? Well, I don't really want to say the word criticism, but let's look at it. So you can actually use that mnemonic and say to people, look, you might be quite shocked about what we're going to talk about. You might be a bit angry. You might need time to reflect. And if you do, let's call it draw stumps. Let's stop. Let's agree on a timeline now to come back and revisit it again. But some people never ever cross the line to accept what's being said because that criticism, that feedback, that open discussion has not been allowed to be done correctly. And therefore they'll attach that emotion to it. And they will always see that captain, they'll always see that member of the crew in that negative light because they'll have attached that emotion to that point in time. That'll stay with them forever. Unless they gain experience and then mentally process and understand, reflecting back some years, exactly why that individual did what they did, said what they said, which then allows them to move forward.
Yeah, it's a lot to do with culture as well. Am I there? Because I froze for a bit. And that has a lot to do with culture, and that's why focusing on soft skills is so important. In our industry, we really do focus on the hard skills over the soft skills. It is a mindset thing as well as what you're referring to there is there's a great TED talk that I use in my leadership course, which is feed forward.
Yeah.
So all about your perception on feedback as well. And you got to see it as a learning opportunity. Yes, we need some constructive feedback in order to grow. And we need some positive feedback so that we can be affirmed when we are doing well. It's a balance. Wayne, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a pleasure to have this chat with you. Normally we're only 10 minutes. So we've done pretty well being almost half an hour. So no, you can see you've got so much information to share. And thank you for coming into the membership in a couple of months and serving the seafarers. It's going to be wonderful to have you to dive deeper into your content. So thanks again.
Listeners for listening. If they're listening intently, that's brilliant. See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
There.